So if you remember from earlier when we talked about vectors, we said that we couldn't put different types of data in a single vector. So we couldn't have a number and a string, for example. There's another structure in R called a list, and this allows you to make a vector with different types of data. And a list is structured exactly like a vector, except for instead of the C for concatenate, we put list, and then parentheses around all the different data that we want in there. So in here I've got a string, a number, a matrix, and another number. And running this will work just like running a vector did. It'll show up in our values table over here. And so if I run both of these, now I have two lists over here. And if I press this arrow, I can see all the elements within it. So I can see name, character is Tom, age is a number, it's 43, grades are integers, and then these are the dimensions of the matrix. And then chickens is a number, and it's 5.3. So we can see all those elements within there. And we can also see the second one as well. So you can also make what I've called here list of lists, which all you do is concatenate with the C two lists. If we run that, then we'll find it here, and we can see everything within that. And if we view it, we'll just see all of the elements down here in order. So the way that we found elements within a vector was we would have the vector name, brackets, and then the number, which was the position in the vector that we wanted to find. But for a list, you have to use the double bracket syntax. So if I wanted to find the second element in list data, the first list we made up here, I would say list data bracket bracket 2. So if we run this, it'll show that it's 43. And if we go back up here, we see, yep, it is the second value. Hi again. So we've talked a lot about different types of data sets in R. So we've talked about vectors and matrices and lists. But in this lesson, we're going to talk about the structure that we're going to use the most in the rest of this class, which is a data frame. So to create a data frame, all we have to do is make a bunch of vectors and combine them into a table. So here I've created 4 example vectors. We've got names, whether the people are hungry or not, how many siblings they have, and how many cookies they have. Just very simple. Once we've made all these, let's type all these out and run all of them. So I'm just going to select all 4 lines, Command Enter, and run them. And so I can check and now see I can see names is in here, siblings is in here, all of these are in here now in the values column. So now that I've got all these, what I want to do is combine them into a single table so that I can relate them all to each other. So I want Alice to relate to T, to relate to 2, to relate to 3. So the way that we do this, we're going to make up a name for our data frame. We're going to call it Cookie Problems. And we're going to say we want to save all this into Cookie Problems. And we're going to say data.frame. And then all you have to do is put the names of these vectors in there. So names, comma, hungry, siblings, cookies. So when I run this, this will show up in our data section. And you may wonder why some things are showing up under the data bar and some things are showing up under the values bar. And the reason for that is all of our data is 2-dimensional or more. So all of these are just vectors. They're just 1-dimensional data. So list data, it's just a straight line of data. It doesn't have rows or columns. But up here we've got all of our matrices and our data frames now. These are all things that have more than one dimension, and you can see that by saying this has 1 row and 13 columns, and these all have multiple rows and multiple columns. So that's the difference there. And since we've made a data frame with 2 dimensions, it shows up in data. So let's view this. So view, and then I press tab. And since I have more than one data frame or vector that starts with COO, I can choose between them. I'm going to choose Cookie Problems. And I'm going to run this. And now it opens up a new window and it puts all the data into a data frame. And so the names of your vectors become the names of your columns up here. So we've got all of the names of the vectors and what the vectors contained. So before, though, we could just make these vectors and R would automatically associate the first value with all the other first values and the second value with all the second values. We can't really do all of our data analysis like that. We can't just leave them each in vector form. And when we get into actually importing data later, it's all going to come in the form of a data frame. So this is a super important thing to know how to do. In this lesson, we learned all about lists, which are a way of combining different types of data into one vector. We also learned how to combine vectors to make data frames, which is what we're going to be working on in subsequent lessons.